The illusion of explanatory depth says don't argue with people about facts to start with. Try to change their confidence.
Hello, and welcome to the Growth Mindset Podcast, where we turn your brain from a seedling to a fully grown tree with just a few episodes. I'm your host, Rashad, and I'll be a personal gardener as we dig up old limiting beliefs and plant new empowering ones. Our podcast covers almost everything you need to know about personal, professional, financial, and spiritual growth. Each episode features successful leaders who will share their stories and strategies to transform you into your best self. So grab your watering can and hit that subscribe button. Let's get growing. Hey Dan, first thing first, thank you so much for taking your time out and joining us on the Growth Mindset podcast.
Thank you so much, and thanks for choosing such a lovely name for the podcast. As you know, it's I think growth mindset. It's one of the most mysterious part of human psychology, and also one of the most positive. So
Interesting.
great choice of a name.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Uh, let's get started, Dan, with some of the most, I would say, crazy and irrational things that I'm really curious about. Let's hit off our conversation with: do humans actually make rational decisions, or are we just deceiving ourselves by saying that?
So, we make a ton of decisions throughout the day, right? We choose what coffee to have and how much coffee and when to drink and so on. And I think many of those decisions are rather sensible. I'm not sure they're perfectly rational, but they are certainly sensible. But some of the decisions we make are not. And it's not so much about what is the percentage of it, it's about what's the downside. Imagine I say, people only text and drive 2% of the time. Yeah, but they can kill themselves and other people during that time. So I think, first of all, it's not just about how many of those, but how consequential are
Hmm.
they. And the other thing that we need to recognize is that the world is not neutral. If we think about nature, bees are in nature, nature is what it is, it takes a really long time to change and so on. We as human beings, we are creating our environment, and our environment is not neutral. In fact, if you think about it, our environment is not designed to get the best out of us. In many ways, it's designed to get the worst out of us. So, for example, we're not well designed evolutionary to deal with money. Money is a new concept, it's a complex concept, and so on. Is the environment designed to get us to make the best decisions with money? Or is the environment designed to get us to spend the most amount of money possible?
Yeah.
You might come to the supermarket and you say, I have an idea of how I'm going to save money and eat healthy things and all kinds of things like that. The supermarket also has a plan, and the supermarket controls the environment. And we end up doing what's good for the supermarket and not what's good for us. So, my model of the human mind is that the human mind is a little bit like a Swiss Army knife.
Hmm.
A Swiss Army knife is not particularly good at anything. There's not a task that you would say, I need a screwdriver, let me go to the Swiss Army knife. I need a can opener. No, it's not ideal for anything, but it's kind of good for lots of things and very, very compact. And our mind is very much like that. Not ideal for anything, but quite good for lots of things. But the challenge is that our Swiss Army knife, the tools that we carry in our mind, are designed to deal with tasks of a long time ago. They're designed to deal with tasks from our evolutionary history. They're not designed to deal with cryptocurrency and living 30 years past retirement. So what we have is we're dragging with us these not so ideal tools that are quite old and not relevant, but those are the tools we have to deal with the world. And now the question is, what kind of world are we going to build? Are we going to live a world that is compatible with our tools? Or are we going to build a world that is incompatible with our tools? And the place where we try to build a world that is compatible with our tools is the world of driving. We're not evolutionarily designed to drive in that speed, pay that much attention, and so on. And most of the development of cars has been to make us less shitty drivers, right? Every year we discover, my goodness, people are really terrible drivers. Let's do another layer of protection. And so, you start with driving. There was a proposal by an economist. How do you get people to drive safer? And he
Hmm.
said, put a sword from the steering wheel. If anything goes bad, you kill yourself. Everybody will be so afraid. Everybody will behave well. Of course, it doesn't really work. But every year we find out that people are worse and worse drivers. So we say, let's do seat belts and let's do anti-lock brakes and let's do rear view mirror and side mirrors and let's add little lights on the side mirrors when, like, we're too lazy to look around and risk our lives. So we do. And now we have these things that force us to stay in the same lane and brake automatically for us, getting really amazing and preventing us from being ourselves. But this is about driving. We're also kind of shitty in almost everything else we do. It's not as if driving is the worst human activity ever, but we're really good in managing our relationships and really good about managing our money and really good at sleep and really good at, it's kind of typical, right? We make lots of mistakes. But in these other areas of life, we have not wisened up yet to realize how much help we need. So for me, the goal of behavioral economics is to alert us to the mistakes we do in our financial decision making, in our relationship, in hate, and so on. By the way, my biggest project right now is about the end of life. So I'm thinking about the last chapter of life, from the moment people get a terminal illness diagnosis until the end of life. And I'm thinking about trying to identify all the mistakes. This chapter in the Western world is slightly longer than 5 years. So you have a lot of time. Only 6 or 7% of the people die quickly. Most people have a lot of time. What are all the mistakes that people are making in this chapter, and how could we make it better? And of course, people would make mistakes. It's the first time we're dying. We're amateurs. We don't know how to do it. The medical system has a lot of control. Their incentives are not the same as ours, and therefore people make all kinds of mistakes. But anyway, for me, it's about the realization that in the same way that we're flawed physically, we're not Superman, we're also flawed cognitively and emotionally. But the tool we have is to design the world in a way that fits our limitations and get that to end up being like Superman. People can't fly, but with planes we can fly.
Yeah.
People can't drive well, but with the aid of good cars we can. People can't consume information well in terms of trust and aggregation, but with the right technology we could do that. So that's the hope, that it's taking people, understanding limitation, and building technology that augments us rather than takes advantage of us.
And do you think that is easy, that is possible? Because from what we're hearing, right, obviously we're not good at making decisions. As obviously you've done thousands of research, you have more data to back all those uh, results out, right? But what is that we can do that we can actually create a better world? Like, I think even though yes, we are not great divers, but at least to some extent we are doing some good stuff as well, right?
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts there? What can we do that's in our control so that we could actually understand ourselves better and start making better decisions?
So I think there's a lot of things to do. I'll give you maybe two examples from very different areas. So do you know the term death doulas?
In India, doula is basically a groom, but I'm not
Okay.
sure. Okay.
So a doula is usually a woman that helps other women give birth. She's
Hmm.
there, she coaches them, she comes before, she helps them understand how to deal with the pain and what will happen, and she's there for the holistic journey of childbirth, to be helpful and to calm everybody down. End of life doulas or death doulas do the same thing for the end of life. It's a newer profession, but they're there to get people to be less worried and to resolve problems, help the family. Mostly it's for people who end up dying at home.
Hmm.
And I've talked to a lot of those. By the way, I'm doing next month. I'm doing the course myself. I'm going to train to become an end of life doula. But in
Interesting.
one study, I asked end of life doulas, what is a good end of life? And they said four things: no pain, medically
Mhm.
possible to a large degree; no loss of dignity in the body, sort of possible; surrounded by love, possible; and feeling a sense of legacy. Oh, and one other interesting thing they said, that a crucial element is whether people accept that they're going to die.
Hmm.
And they said the reason that acceptance is so important is that if you have a strange family, like maybe you haven't talked to your brother or sister or son or something, unless there's acceptance, you're not going to try and fix it. Unless there's acceptance, you're not going to start working on legacy. So I look at it and I say, way too many people get to the last stage of life where they have things to mend, they have things to fix, and we can help them do that. Very hard to call your brother or sister and say sorry.
Yeah.
But when we don't do it longer and longer, it becomes harder and harder. Very hard to think about our legacy. What do we want to leave behind? What is important to us? But if somebody would help us do it, we could do it. So you can think about on that side, but I'll give you another example. You give people a credit card. What happens? People overspend.
Yeah.
You give people a prepaid debit card. It's not as bad.
Hmm.
Why? Because with the credit card, you just go up and up and up. Why stop? Debit card, you go down and down and down. You put money in and you see it going down. You give people a prepaid debit card that loads not monthly but weekly. It's better.
Hmm.
Why? Because if you upload $2,000 on your credit card every month, in the beginning of the month, you feel rich and you spend very easily. A week seems to be more compatible with human nature, right? You
Hmm.
can start thinking about what
Yeah.
it means. And also, loading the card on Monday is better than loading it on Saturday or Friday.
Hmm.
Why? Because
Interesting.
if you load it just before the weekend, you feel rich on the weekend and you overspend. If you load it in the
Interesting.
beginning of the week, you try to save money for the weekend.
Hmm.
Anyway, that's a small example, but it just says, should we give people credit card or debit card, monthly or weekly, Monday or Friday? All of those decisions end up mattering. And of course,
Hmm.
we can take any area of life. We can take design of the kitchen. Most people say that they have rotting fruits and vegetables in their refrigerators. Why? You open your refrigerator, you look at eye level. You don't see
Yeah.
fruit and vegetables. You don't feel like opening those drawers. There's something amazing. Like, you ask people if they like apples, everybody says they like apples. You put out apples, nobody touches them.
Hmm.
You cut the apples into quarters, they disappear. That taking an apple is just a little bit too much work. You cut it into quarters,
Hmm.
everything works. But the point is that there's lots of things when you start looking. I adore design because I think when you start looking at the little details, you find tremendous opportunity for improvement in design. Almost everything we do, our phones, our computers, the way we sit, the way we drink coffee. I mean, there's so many rooms for improvement. The moment you say, let me open my mind to the possibility that human nature is flawed and that people would use whatever environment we create to them the way the environment says, not the optimal way, then you say, let's design a better environment.
Interesting. And here's what I have, a follow-up question to that. Yes, I understand the preface here, the foundation is that yes, human nature is flawed. We are not making the best decision that we should be making ourselves, right? I mean, let's take a common example. Even if you're going out, you shouldn't be eating sugar, brownies all the time, but we still go ahead and give in to our temptations of eating them, and obviously that
And,
has a
and
long-term
just to be
implication.
clear, somebody is designing those cookies,
Exactly.
right? Somebody is saying, I know that these people have a weakness for sweets.
Yeah.
I'm not going to serve them broccoli. I'll serve them the kind of things that tempt them. So the environment that we're growing in is an environment that tries to tempt us. It's an environment that tries to build on our weaknesses. So, going back to your original question, how many mistakes we make? Well, the environment is trying to get us to make more mistakes.
Hmm. And before we take these decisions, right? Like obviously now we have been tempted and someone is going ahead and eating brownies, sugar, pastries, cakes, whatever and whatnot. What's the back end? Like how is this psyche working, right? Like the psychology of the brain is. For example, are these decisions driven by emotions? Because obviously they are, I don't think they're rational, right? Because if you're rational, you would
That's
not
right.
eat it in the first place.
So think about long term versus short term. Long term has no emotions, it's all computation. Short term has a lot of emotions. So imagine I say to you, what would you prefer a year from now? Salad or what's the most tempting Indian sweet?
I think it's gulab jamun.
Gulab jamun. Okay. So I say, a year from now, what would you prefer? A plate of salad or gulab jamun? And you would say, a year from now, I'll take the salad. But then I get them closer to you until they're here. And I say,
Hmm.
please smell those two. Which one do you want? Now, a
Yes.
year from now, the gulab jamun has no emotion. It's
Hmm.
abstract, it's distance. You're thinking about it in a cold cognitive way and you say, I don't want it. As it gets closer and you start seeing it in real, not just description, and you start smelling it, it starts impacting your emotional system,
Hmm.
right? Even when we talk now, it's not as intense as if you really had it in front of you, right?
Yes.
And so the moment things in front of us, the emotions get evoked. And the way emotions work is that when they get evoked, they create almost an automated response that is very hard to override.
Hmm.
Like you have a craving that is automatic.
Yes.
Like Galab Jamun in a year from now has no emotion and no craving.
Yes.
Galab
Correct.
Jamun in a plate in front of you has lots of emotion and a lot of craving, and then you need to put lots of effort to suppress it, but it's very hard.
Yes. So, what can we do so that we don't make those decisions, the short term pleasures? What is in our control?
So there are lots of different ways to do it. The first one is not to be tempted, right? You can say to yourself, like you can go and say, I'll buy some Galab Jamun and I'll have one small one of those every other day. Or you could say, if they'll be in my refrigerator, I will have too many. So let me just not have them available. Right?
Hmm.
That's one approach. The second approach is to create rules, right? And rules could be things that basically say, I know that if I'll come to a decision every time fresh, there are many times I'll make a mistake. Imagine you
Yes.
say, I want to reduce the number of sweets. If you say, what I'll do is every time I come to a sweet, I will consider yes, no, and I'll try to do it less. Very likely, the moment the sweet gets
Hmm.
close to you, you'll forget about that and you'll feel like doing it now. You say, oh, yeah, I'll eat this sweet now. I'll not eat the one tomorrow or the day after or something like that. So, rules really help us. So, for example, you could say, I only eat sweets on Fridays.
Hmm.
Right now, asking the question of should I or shouldn't I, you realize that our emotion get the best of us. They get us to be emotional rather than to do the right thing that we don't want to. We create either restriction, full restriction. I'm not eating those things. I'm not putting them in the home or something like that. Or you say, I have a very clear rule that I don't have to ask myself. It's not Friday. I'm
Hmm.
not eating one of those.
Got it.
So
Makes sense.
but what we don't want, sadly, is to every time consider that decision. Because
Hmm.
if we consider it every time, it's not a habit, it's not a rule, and so on, it's too available, we'll end up making mistakes too often. Like, it
Interesting.
would be nice if we were all like the Dalai Lama and we could stare at the croissant and say no, but we're not.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's interesting. I think one of the major takeaways that I particularly understand is that stay away from that. Like go cold turkey if needed, right? So that you don't even get to that path. Is that correct
Yeah.
statement?
The idea is that with the things that you can, take away temptation from your path.
Hmm.
It's harder to override temptation. Like you say to yourself, oh, the waiter will come, he will show me the dessert tray, and I will say no. No, the waiter would come, they will show you the dessert tray, you will become slightly different person. You'll become a person who really is interested in desserts right now and not thinking so much about the future. Ask the waiters not to show you the dessert tray.
Yeah.
Right?
Stop it
So
right there.
so,
Yeah.
topic number one is remove temptation from our path. Version number two is to say create some rules. And the more clear the rules are, the better it is. Now, it's not the only way, there are many other ways to deal with it, but those are the first two.
Hmm, got it. Now, this is something that has kind of interest me because I've read a couple of books on psychology, human nature, and what I've understood is men and women are kind of different in terms of making decisions. Obviously, I'll leave it to the expert to answer. You're the best person to answer that. But are men making more rational decisions versus women, or are we all on the same page or on the same plateau?
So the biggest topics where we measured gender difference was in the research on dishonesty. We did basically a lot of research where we tempted people to charge us more money than they deserved, and we found that lots of people cheat a little bit, and that's the case where we found a very large gender difference. And the
Interesting.
gender difference was that women thought that women would be much more honest. They were not. The real results show no difference, but the prediction were that women
Hmm.
thought that women would be much more honest.
Interesting.
In general, I'll say something more general about this.
Hmm.
There are some very basic decisions or a process, human processes. Think about visual illusions. Those things don't have big gender differences. When you think about the effect of default option, there's lots of very basic things that gender doesn't play out. Gender starts playing a role when things become more complex,
Hmm.
when the construct we're testing is less basic and more social. So, the physiology of men and women are sort of similar. I mean, there are differences, but it's sort of similar. But the moment you get to social elements, they're different. For example, in the domain of dishonesty, we found that in online dating, men lie about their height and women lie about their hair color. It's a difference, right? It's not that women
Yeah.
are more honest than men. Just socially, what they're trying to convey as important is different. But that's a very high social element. But the basic morality is very similar.
Interesting. Now, the impact of stress and emotions, right? In general, in people's life.
So when we think about stress, there are two kinds of stress. There's the stress that basically says, I have 300 emails waiting for me. I don't know when I'll be able to finish. I don't know if I'll be able to do it. And we call this stress, it's not such bad stress. It just
Hmm.
means we have a lot of work, but it's up to us. On the other hand, there's the kind of stress that is connected to what we call learned helplessness. I don't understand the world. Think about early day COVID. What is this thing? A virus in China, in a lab, an animal
Yes.
traveling around the world, people in Italy. Am I going to lose my job? Why are we closing the office? Where are my kids going? How do I handle my kids studying from home? I mean, terrible, terrible complexity. And basically not understanding where things are. For example, I met early COVID, I met a teacher who lost her job. She couldn't believe why she lost her job and other teachers didn't. Now, it was because she was not in a union and they were, and there was a
Hmm.
reason for it. But she was so baffled. So she was stressed from COVID, plus didn't understand why she lost her job. She ended up having to give up her apartment. She moved to living in her car. And, just, I don't understand the world. What's happening here? How can it be that I'm a teacher? I teach with all these people. They got to keep their job. I lost my job. I lost my apartment and so on. So that stress, the one that is connected with learned helplessness, I don't understand the world, is a very, very dangerous stress. It's a very dangerous
Hmm.
stress. And it basically leads people to try and find alternative explanation to what's happening in the world.
Okay.
So think about this woman I told you about. What does her psychology forces her to do? She doesn't want to come to be the one guilty, and she needs a story. So she's looking for a story with the villain that is not hers,
Exactly.
not her. Right? So stress, non-controllable. We're looking for a story, and then we're looking for a story ideally with the villain, and that is not us, and it's their fault. Um, the other thing to understand about stress is the usual antidote against stress is resilience.
Hmm.
So think about the following. Imagine a timeline and imagine life. Slightly better, slightly worse, slightly better, slightly worse, slightly better, slightly better. At some point, something terrible happened. In my case, I got badly burned, 70% of my body, 3 years in hospital. Terrible. And then usually we think about resilience is, do we go back? Do we go back to the same level, above? Post
Hmm.
traumatic growth is if we get above, below, how long it takes us. Usually we think about resilience as from the moment of catastrophe to recovery. How
Hmm.
long is this? Where do we get? That's kind of resilience, is the bouncing back. But the reality is that resilience is also in this time when nothing bad happened already. Nothing happened.
Hmm.
Here is the thing. There is something called secure attachment. And imagine you're a parent. You have a kid, the kid is 4 years old, and you take the kid to the park and you say, hey, kid, go to the swings. Kid run to the swings and comes back an hour later. If that happened, you have been successful with secure attachment. On the other hand, if you tell the kid, go to the swings, and they go, but they look behind their shoulder every 90 seconds to see if you're there. Not so successful in secure attachment. Now, nothing bad happened. You're still running around life. But now there's a kid, the secure attachment kid is a kid that says, I know that if something bad will happen, somebody will catch me. I don't need to look. I know it will happen. And you have the other kid who says, I'm not so sure if people would catch me. And that feeling, I think that everybody should ask themselves, do I feel that if something bad happened, somebody would catch me? And you want the answer to be yes. You also want your friends to answer yes. Like you, I think that friendship, it's us, our family, and our friends. And we want to feel that somebody would catch us, and we want to give the people who are close to us the feeling that somebody would catch us. By the way, my model of parenthood is that we should be the venture capitalists of our kids. What are venture capitalists really doing? VCs. They come to companies and they say, we know you're not going to take enough risk. So we will pay you to take risk with our money. We have your back. You're not risking anything, right? It's kind of like, don't worry about this. Go for it. I think in many ways, that's the feeling that we want to give our kids. Go, kid. Try, take risk, do things. We're here to catch you if you need us. That I think is the right model. Also think it's what society should provide for people. But in general, we're in a period that we have high stress and we're in a period that we have low resilience. Why do we have low resilience? Because we don't spend as much time with our friends as we used to. It's because we don't have the same level of work friends that we used to. COVID, but also other things have made the workplace more work and less friends. Spending less time with the extended family, more time with the nuclear family. And very interestingly and very sadly, every time financial inequality increases, resilience goes down. Even at the level of a neighborhood, if you think that people in your neighborhood makes more money than you, that the economic inequality increases, we are less likely to ask for help. So we're at a period of high stress, COVID, political polarization, the war in Ukraine, the war in the Middle East. What are the Houthis exactly doing? What's the role of AI? Some of my students are asking, the jobs that we're studying now for, will they still exist in 5 years? I don't know. So we have lots of stress, very low resilience, and we're very, very sensitive because of that. And that fuels misinformation, and that fuels misbelief, and it fuels conspiracies, and it fuels polarization. We are not living in peace right now. There's something stressful without resilience, and I think we need to do things to reduce stress, but I think the easier things are actually to increase resilience.
Hmm. You've touched upon a lot of important pointers, Dan, and I'd like to dissect them one by one, right? Because I think that those are crucial. For example, one of the things that you spoke about was secure attachment. Now, I know a lot of people, yes, for people that are young parents, maybe they might go ahead and teach their kids accordingly, giving them that secure attachment. But for people that have already grown up, right, and now they don't have that kind of an environment, what can they do or start having that secure attachment? Is there any way that they could start working?
Um, Eventually, you get secure attachment from your family, friends, and government. Maybe also
Okay.
some from the workplace. And ask yourself, do you feel that you have enough of that? Right? So imagine that tonight you were in a place far away from home, 3,000 miles away, you had a car accident. How many people could you call and say, would you please take a flight to come here, and would you please pay, $20,000 to pay for my hospital bill? That's like, if you fall, will somebody be able to catch you? Right? And I think that if people say, I don't have enough of those people in my life, start investing in them. I don't think that the answer is that it's impossible to arrive at that. I think that we are living in a world that is slightly too socially superficial. If you go and all of your interactions are online, you never lubricate the social exchange relationship. I mean, in fact, think about it. How many favors have people asked for you recently? If the number is not big, that's not good.
Mm.
right? Yeah, it's not. I mean, it could be because your friends are doing so well, nobody needs help in anything. But most likely is that your friends don't have enough social resilience, and you're not the one providing it for them. By the way, in the last 24 hours, two of my friends wanted to talk because they went on vacation with their girlfriends, and their girlfriend dumped them at the end of
Oh.
this. I am unbelievably grateful. I'm unbelievably grateful that these are people I care and respect. I think they're amazing, and they are in a moment of need. They don't know where to go, and they come to me. I told both of them. I said, look, I think that you're an amazing catch. I said, if you're a stock in the stock market, you're only going to increase in value. You're underappreciated right now. Just give it some time. You'll
Yeah.
mature. You'll get into yourself. But stressful time, unpleasant, not sure where to go. Do we have those people to go to, and are we providing enough of that? So I would say yes. I would like also the government to provide more secure
Mm.
attachment, universal basic income. There's all kinds of things to talk about. We should start by looking socially at what other people are helping us with and what we're helping other people. And women are usually better at this than men in terms of having a good social relationship. But I think men need to improve. I think women have a room to improvement too, but men have a much larger role for improvement.
Interesting.
I'll give you another example of a complex question. Do you mix finances and friendship?
Hmm.
Very complex question. The moment you mix finances and friendship, there's all kinds of risks. On the other hand, if you go and you say to people, I see that you're in a need, I usually don't wait for people to ask. Asking is very tough. Asking
Yeah.
also doesn't give people a sense of resilience. You want to say, hey, it looks like you're stressed out financially. Right now you have these extra bills. I'll give you an example of something I helped a friend a few years ago. This was a friend that was needed to raise money for something,
Hmm.
quite a substantial amount, and very stressed over this. And what I basically said was, I said, look, I understand you need to raise all this money. Take 2 months, raise as much as you can. Whatever you don't manage, I'll give you. Now, think about what I did was I said, I have your back.
Hmm.
You're going to reach your goal because she had to, but I'm also giving you the energy to go and find other paths, right? So for me, that's kind of a version of secure attachment. I have your back. Then go try work. It was substantial for me. It wasn't easy to do, so I said, I have your back, but go for it. That's the kind of things we need to provide more to each
Hmm.
other, and it's always tough to do things that are like, if you think about how we help friends, we support them emotionally, we give them time, but when it comes to money, it adds another complexity. I personally think that if people don't ask but you give, and if you give as a gift and not as a loan, things are much better. But it is a complex topic. Everybody needs to make their own peace with it. I'm in favor of mixing friendship and finances. I think everybody benefits.
Hmm. I love
Everybody
that.
can benefit. Everybody can benefit if you do it the right way.
I love it, Dan, because I did not have a lot of data to be backed up by this, but I always tell this to my friends as well, saying, if something is going wrong, like if you're giving someone like one of your friends money, don't expect it to come back. Like I didn't say give it as a gift, but I've noticed that whenever you expect people to return your money back, especially your friends, then you are setting expectations, and then I think if they don't come back at the right time, then that's when those relationships fall off, right? But
Mhm.
when you know that you're going to go ahead and give the money anyways, and you're not even expecting that money back, if he gives it, if he gives, good. If it doesn't, that doesn't matter, right? I
Yep.
think, and that's what you mentioned, like giving it as a gift is way more good, because then you are building strong friendships, and as you mentioned, right, it all eventually goes back to that secure attachment that we have. Go ahead.
Let me just say, there are lots of other things to do. So a few years ago, I started taking some time off every year and going hiking with two friends.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing. We take a month. We take a month off and we go hiking. And it's amazing because we're men. We don't talk that much. During the year, but hiking, it's an amazing opportunity. You don't look into each other's eyes. You look in the same direction. You walk. It's perfectly fine to go silent for a while.
Hmm.
I'm starting to talk about something, I'm stopping, I'm thinking about it. Also, because we go for such a long time, it's perfectly fine to go back to some topics. Like, usually
Hmm.
when you meet people, you cover, like you have an agenda. Let's
Yeah.
cover. When you go for a while, it's perfectly fine to go back to some topics. Well, I know
Hmm.
we talked about it yesterday or earlier today, but I'm still thinking about this. What do you think? Here's this. So it's walking, it's strenuous, you don't have to talk all the time. You can walk a little faster, walk a little slower, get back together. That for me has been an amazing gift. First of all, it's a gift to take some time to hike, but it's also a gift to spend really close time with two very very dear friends. And then another thing I did was, one of the same people and one different. We bought together a whiskey barrel. We bought a whiskey barrel from a distillery called Milk and Honey, and once a year we came to visit our whiskey barrel. So for 5 years we would come and check on it, and taste it, and so on. And then on the fifth year we decided it was good enough, and we bottled it, and we made our own brand, and we have our little T-shirts, and
Nice.
we're midlife crisis kind of
Nice.
people, but it's kind of nice.
Yeah.
We have our own logo, and we have our own bottles, and we give them as gifts, and just a lovely little adventure to do together.
Nice, nice. I think it's more about you finding ways to connect with your friends, and then just having that bond. I think is what is going to be crucial for our lives. One of the pointers that you mentioned, Dan, while we were talking about stress, was resilience, right? And you touched upon a couple of important pointers. So I wanna understand that. You mentioned resilience is what can help us in high stressful situations, right?
Yeah.
How can someone build resilience?
So my metaphor for resilience, and it's not correct, it's just a metaphor, is that it's like the immune system. Stress come, it's like viruses attacking the body, and the question is, how good is your immune system in
Hmm.
in fighting it? And resilience is mostly about this feeling: if I fall, will somebody catch me?
Got it.
Think about stressful events. So, for example, one very stressful event is losing a job. Now, if you work at a startup and the whole startup closes, that's not a very stressful event. But if there's a team of 20 people and you're the only one who's fired, that's a very stressful event, because you say to yourself, what's going on? Why me?
Hmm.
And if I was the only one fired in this job, who is to say that I will not be the only one fired from my next job? Part of the story. Now, if you think you will always have people to rely on, that
Hmm.
diffuses some of that stress. If you have people that say to you and you trust them, no, you're an amazing, qualified person. Here's the story for this. This is the reason for this. But they have faith in you that in your next job it will not be like that. That's really, really important. So, so resilience is basically, it's like an insurance policy.
Hmm.
If you have an insurance policy for anything, you basically say, why do I can weather
Exactly.
ups and downs, right? In the same way that if you're financially well off, you don't worry so much if you don't get paid, like you don't get paid one month. You
Hmm.
can easily cushion there. You have a cushion. Um, if you have a social cushion and a financial cushion in the form of other people around you, you can weather lots of things.
Interesting. Yes, makes sense. Now, one of the other pointers while we were discussing in the course of that discussion, you mentioned in that financial realm, right? If there are some people that are not that financially strong, let's say someone who's poor versus someone who's rich. In your book, there was a statement which really struck me. I found it really interesting, and that's why I thought I'll ask you this during this conversation. Do people that are poor have low IQs as compared to people that are rich?
So the answer is no. But so the study that you are referring to is a study that was done in India. It was done on people who are growing sugarcane. And the thing about sugarcane is that, and Indian farmers of sugarcane, is that when they cut the sugarcane, they have some money. And 6 weeks before, they are very poor. So
Hmm.
their income is very sensitive to where the harvest season is. And what this team of researchers did was to test them on IQ tests, ones that don't require reading because not all of those people can read, but they test them on IQ test when there was a harvest versus 6 weeks before. Harvest, they have money; 6 weeks before, no money, and they saw about slightly more than 20% difference between the two. Now, were these people really less intelligent? No. It's not as if your intelligence shrinks and expand depending on your momentary financial well-being. What happened is this thing we call scarcity mindset.
Hmm.
And when people are experiencing scarcity, part of their mind is preoccupied with something else. So if you're very poor, part of your mind is occupied, will I be able to pay this loan back?
Hmm.
My kid needs medicine. Will I be able to pay for it? Will
Hmm.
I be able to afford food today on the table? Do we have money for kerosene? Now, you might be focused on an IQ test, but part of your mind is preoccupied.
Yes.
The same thing happens if you're worried about an ailing parent. If you're taking care of an ailing parent, you can never drop that and just focus on whatever it is that you do at work. In my case, and you're referring to this book called Misbelief, which I wrote about conspiracies, and I describe in the book the period in my life where I was viciously attacked by people who thought the COVID was a pandemic. I got death threats. It was very, very tough. It was very tough. People send me videos of them burning my books. It was really awful. It's still going on, but at a very low level. But then it was like poof all the time, many times a day, every day. It was very, very tough. And what I describe in the book is the extent to which I felt scarcity mindset. Not
Hmm.
financially, nothing have changed for me financially, but it was this thing that felt that part of my mind was preoccupied with the hate
Hmm.
against me. So, I would go to check my email. I say, what would come here? And
Yeah.
sometimes I would check social media and say, what's going on? And like there was this sense that people are plotting against me, people are writing terrible
Hmm.
things against me, and I couldn't stop it. Well, I could reduce it, but couldn't stop it. I felt it was amazing because I felt I was trying to do my work, but I was like operating at 80% capacity. I
Hmm.
felt that 20% of my capacity were busy with the people who were making stuff up about me. It took me a while to slightly get used to it, slightly change my approach, and so on. And then it went away, but it's a very, very tough thing. I think that kids who are being bullied,
Yeah.
for example, in some sense, I was bullied in a very strange way, but I think kids who are bullied, I'm amazed that they can focus in class. Such a tough experience. So, I did understand to a higher degree, and it's amazing because when it happens, you can't shake it. Like I felt I was at, let's say, 80% capacity, and I wanted to focus more, but I couldn't. Right, part of my mind
Hmm.
just wouldn't let go, processing those other things. By the way, at night it was very interesting because at night I had lots of nightmares. Right, during the day I was able to focus to a large degree, not fully, but
Hmm.
to a large degree. But at night, when there's no control, the nightmares would just come out.
That's a, I mean, I know because I've been reading your book and I know the kind of experience you've described in the book, and it's crazy, right? And I want to ask you specifically that because that topic came up, conspiracy theories, right? Obviously, I know in the West it's very prominent. A lot of people do believe. In India it's not that much, but still there is a good amount of people that do believe in it. But you help us understand because you're an expert in this and you've done a lot of research. Why do people believe in conspiracy theories?
So first of all, the book is called Misbelief, and I try not to use the term conspiracy. And the reason for that is that it's a derogatory term, and I don't think it doesn't explain the psychology of it. Conspiracy theory is about the theory. Misbelief is about the state of a person. So for me, aside from being derogatory, misbelief has two components. The first component is you believe in something that is not real. But the second thing is that you adopt this belief as a lens from which you view other things in life. And that's the important part, right? Because if you say to yourself, well, maybe the earth is flat. Uh, okay, it's a shame, but not a big loss. But the moment you say, I think the world is flat and I'm adopting it as a perspective from which I view the rest of the life, then I say, NASA is lying to me, and the US government is lying to me, and every government is lying to me, and there's no space program anywhere, and there are no satellites, and what else are they lying to me about?
Yes.
Right? So it's not just about the belief, it's about adopting it as a perspective from which you view life. Now, I don't know what's going on in India in that regard, right? Because again, it's not so interesting to say, yes, flat earth, no. The question is, do people adopt those things as a lens, and do those lenses then become larger and larger in scope, and they influence trust in the government and trust in institution and trust in schools and trust in pharma and so on. So now, why do people adopt those things? So we kind of started to say that when we talked about stress, and we said that when the world is not clear and people feel that they are not getting their share and something is wrong, people have the pressure to find a story with the villain. And they turn to the internet, and the internet provides you lots of stories with lots of villains. And then you find one of those, and then it goes from there. And the interesting thing is that, on my journey to understand misbelief, one of the things I understood is that those misbeliefs are not for nothing. It's not as if somebody wakes up one day and says, I can believe in a merciful God, or I can believe that this guy, Dan Ariely and Bill Gates and the Illuminati are trying to inject G5 chip into my kids and get them to be non fertile. Let me choose that one. Nobody chooses that belief. It's an awful, awful way to live. But what happens is that when we feel stress, we need a story. And that story gives us an immediate comfort. Now, is it helpful in the long term? No. But in the short term, you say, at least I understand what's going on. Right? You have this woman who was a teacher, lost her job, living in a car, and she says, you're the one who architected it. At the moment, she feels better. Now, long term, she feels worse because now she says, oh my goodness, there's this terrible guy in the world and he's controlling things and he has power and all kind of thing. But at the moment, she feels that she's in control because she understands. So it's like an autoimmune reaction. It's a reaction to a stressful situation that is good at the moment, but not good at the long term. And by the way, it continues and get worse from there, right? So this is just the beginning. So stress, high stress and low resilience are the necessary but not sufficient conditions for misbelief. They start the ball rolling. If people were not stressed, we would not get misbelief.
Hmm.
Once you get people to be stressed and anxious and not knowing what's going on, now they can take the seeds of misbelief and start developing them, and then it gets worse and worse from there. And the biggest topic, the biggest element, of course, is the social element. And the social element is what seals the deal. When people get to the social element, very hard to escape. Like if you look around at your family and friends and you say, here's some people who have start believing in not so helpful things for themselves and for society, help them in the early stages and realize that if you wait with your help until you get to the social element, there's a good chance you'll miss the mark and not be able to help them anymore.
Interesting. Now, when you said you can help that person at the beginning stages, how can they help?
So the first thing that we could do is provide people resilience.
Yes.
You're loved. You might ask these questions, but you're still loved. The second thing is you want to expose people to thoughtful conversations about this topic. Um, our instinct, when people have very different opinion than ours, our instinct is to reject them.
Yes.
In the US, there's very, very emotional debates on pro life and pro choice, yes and not, for and against abortions.
Mm-hmm.
And when somebody has a different opinion, they get feel very rejected. And nobody is able to. It's not easy to create an atmosphere of acceptance. We create an atmosphere of rejection. And when people feel rejected, they go and find people of their own type that believe exactly what they do, and they separate and they go away. But another technique that I love is called the illusion of explanatory depth. It's based on the illusion of explanatory depth. What's the illusion of explanatory depth? The illusion of explanatory depth is the idea that our confidence is often much higher than our real knowledge. So, for example, I showed it with a flush toilet. I came to people and I said, "Do you understand how a flush toilet works?" I said, "Yes." On a scale from 1 to 7, almost 7. Great. I said, "Here are all the pieces of a brand new flush toilet. Can you please assemble it?"
Hmm.
Nobody could assemble it. And then I say, "So how well do you understand it?" Say, "Not so much." Now, usually when we argue with people, we argue a fact and we attack them. A much healthier approach is to say, "Help me understand what you're saying. Help me
Hmm.
understand it in a deeper and deeper way." So, for example, imagine people who think that the last presidential election in the US was stolen from Trump. Imagine you take those people and you say, "Help me understand, how do elections get tallied? How do the votes get counted?" And you talk to people and they say something and say, "Yes, but how? Like, help me." You know what? I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so here's how the votes get tallied, and how would they get stolen? How do you bypass all the mechanisms that are there in the mechanism? Say, "I don't know." Now, when you have this discussion, now notice that this discussion doesn't feel like attacking. I'm not attacking. I'm saying, "Please
Yeah.
help me understand. How do you count? How could they get stolen?" I'm not arguing with you.
Exactly.
Just help me understand how it gets
Yeah.
stolen. And now what happened is that people say, "I don't know." Now, do they move from being pro-Trump to anti-Trump in this particular example? Of course not. But do they say, "I am not so sure that the elections were really stolen"? That's absolutely the case. The illusion of explanatory depth says, don't fight, don't argue with people about facts to start with. Try to change their confidence. By the way, there's a term for a personality trait called intellectual humility.
Hmm.
Terrible name, but the intellectual humility is basically about the fact that people are willing to admit that they might be wrong. Right? I think that X, Y, and Z, but I could be wrong.
Hmm.
Think about the way we eat. I'll ask you, what do you think is a healthy diet?
Yeah. Like vegetables, fruits,
Like, you
meat,
could
eggs.
say, "I believe that the Middle Eastern diet is healthy. I
Ah,
believe
okay.
the Indian diet is healthy. I believe that intermittent fasting is healthy." I mean, I believe that it's good to fast 2 days a week, whatever you believe. If you have intellectual humility, you would say, "That's what I believe, and that's what I try to do,
Hmm.
but I might be wrong."
I see.
Right? Intellectual humility, by the way, is a really good thing to try and get in our kids and also in
Hmm.
ourselves. Right? Actually, in Hinduism, I really like the notion of karma, and I know there are many versions of
Yes.
karma, but the one I love is that karma is the law of cause and effect, but it's not deterministic. It's not as if you do A, it will cause B. It's just that
Hmm.
if you do more of A, there's more chance that good things will happen, and if you do more of
Yes.
something not so good, there's more chance. But there's a randomness in the system. It's not guaranteed. There's a chance
Hmm.
that a good thing will happen. And I really like that approach, because it says to me that all I control are things that I do.
Yes.
Like, if I do the best I can, that's where, like, the world can take it and good things can happen or bad things can happen. It's just a statistical game. But my responsibility is for the things that I do. That's what I'm responsible for, and that's what I should be doing. So I like the fact that there's randomness. It says, "Look,
Yes.
don't expect for sure
Yeah.
there's randomness." And then I like the part about the responsibility, about whatever you do. It's not about the outcome. The outcome, you could do all the right things, and the outcome would not be great. That's okay. You still did your job.
Exactly. I love it. I know, Dan, we are coming to the end, but there's one question that I want to ask because I think that's crucial and I think it's a good question to probably end with, right? And the question is, we've spoken about conspiracy theories, misbelief specifically, right? How it affects and what can we do to help others, basically. not to get down that rabbit hole. But how can we as an individual ensure, first, how are we able to dissect what is true from false facts, right? And then how can we prevent ourselves from getting into that misbelief where we start believing in all the conspiracy theories?
So first of all, I think that separating truth from fact is very tough. The world is very complex. There's lots of
Yes.
information out there. I don't think it's as easy. But
Mhm.
again, we said that misbelief is two things. It's about believing in something that is not true, but also adopting as a perspective.
Yes.
So the first thing I would do is I would say be very careful to adopt a set of belief as your perspective. Right? The moment you have a sense of something, try to remain intellectually humble. Try to say, I think this is right, but I'm 95% correct. Don't
Mm,
go to the 100% correct. And don't adopt things so quickly as a framework from which you view life. So
mm.
that would be the first thing, right? I do think that we need to critically examine things, right? So I don't think we should just accept things. We should
Yeah.
critically examine them, but we should be very careful to adopt things as I'm 100% sure I'm going to use it as a perspective on life. Um, that's one thing. And the other thing is there's a phrase that I like. What would it take to change your mind or my mind? So imagine we take a topic. Let's take a difficult topic like abortion rights. And I would ask you, what would it take to change your mind? If you basically say nothing, then you have to admit that you're not in the realm of information. You
Mm,
might pretend that it's about information and so on. Or if I told you, if I said, what's your opinion about climate change? And I said, what would it take to change your mind? And you say nothing, or something that is so astounding that it couldn't happen, then maybe we're not in the realm of information. So it's very helpful for us to, like, it's fine to have some things on blind faith, and it's fine to not question everything. It's okay, but we just need to understand that we're there. So if you ask yourself, what would it take to change my mind, and you say nothing, at least you know where
yeah.
you are. And if you understand what it would take, now at least we're on the journey. And the
Mm,
last recommendation is that every time you do a Google search or whatever search you do, also do the opposite search.
mm.
So if you say, what's the link between what are the proofs that vaccines cause something? Also do the opposite. What's the proof that vaccines don't cause? Many times we're searching for things that are confirmatory.
Yes.
Try to also search for the things that are opposite.
Perfect. Dan, I really love kind of insight that you've shared with my audience. I know they will find a lot of benefit out of this conversation, and I hope they challenge themselves, become more humble, as you mentioned, verify things before just believing something and just confirming the same thing that they believe and finding evidence that support what they already believe in. One last thing, Dan, how can people reach out to people that want to follow you, find your work?
The best place is on my website, www.danariely.com. Lots of information there.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
This brings us to the end of this episode and hope you at least had one takeaway from this interview. If you have any questions or want to talk to me personally, you can find me at www.silawatirshad.com. See you soon.